Welcome to Flashback, a recap of stories that made headlines during the week. On Monday, the chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, Abdulrasheed Bawa, was sent to prison for disobeying a court order. Justice R.O. Ayola of the Kogi State High Court, in his judgment, granted the application for committal to prison of the EFCC chairman for disobeying a court ruling delivered on the 30th of November, wherein Mr. Bawa was directed to produce the applicant in the case, Ali Bello. Ali Bello had dragged Bawa to court for arresting and detaining him illegally, with the court ruling in his favor, only for the EFCC to arraign him for alleged money laundering 3 days after the ruling. The court also directed the Inspector General of Police to effect Mr. Bawa's arrest and remand him in Kuje prison for 14 days until he purges himself of the contempt. And still on Monday, with a split judgment of 3-2, the Supreme Court restored the Senate President Ahmad Lawan as the senatorial candidate of the All Progressives Congress for Yobe North Senatorial District. And in a majority decision, the Apex Court also set aside the judgment of the Federal High Court and the Court of Appeal, which affirmed Bashir Machina as senatorial candidate for Yobe North.
The ground for setting aside the two earlier judgments by the Supreme Court was that Mr. Bashir Machina adopted the originating summons to file his case at the Federal High Court. Justice Centus Nweze, who delivered the majority judgment, held that Mr. Bashir Machina ought to have commenced his case at the Federal High Court with a writ of summons because of grievous allegations in his suit against the defendants. Justice Nweze said the hostile issues were involved in Machina's matter and that cannot be resolved through originating summons. However, Justice Adamu Jairu and Emmanuel Agim disagreed with the majority judgment. They both held that the Federal High Court and the Court of Appeal were correct in their findings to have declared Mr. Machina as APC senatorial candidate for Yobe North Senatorial District. The two justices held that Mr. Machina was lawfully nominated because the primary election of 28 May 2022, which produced him, was lawfully conducted in line with the provisions of the law. Justice Jairu and Justice Agim insisted that APC conducted an unlawful primary election because the 28th of May primary election was not cancelled before that of June 9, 2022 was held, which purportedly produced Mr. Lawan. This, they say, was illegal, unlawful, and a breach of Section 285 of the Constitution. Besides, they held that Mr. Lawan, in an undisputed letter to APC, voluntarily withdrew his participation in the primary election for the presidential election. They contended that INEC was specific that it witnessed the May 28 primary election that produced Mr. Machina, but did not witness that of June 9, 2022 because there was no notification from APC to that effect. They therefore dismissed the appeal by the APC for being incompetent and awarded a cost of 3 million naira in favor of Mr. Machina. But Justice Nweze made it clear that the majority judgment is the judgment of the court. Reacting, the President of the Senate described the judgment as a true representation of the rule of law.
The Central Bank of Nigeria on Tuesday said it will provide all the cash INEC needs on Election Day. Godwin Ogmefile told the visiting chairman of INEC that the cash swap deadline will not affect the conduct of the polls. And the INEC chairman also received a security brief at the office of the National Security Advisor and he was assured about the readiness for a hitch-free poll.
The Independent National Electoral Commission needs strong assurances from stakeholders critical to the successful conduct of the general election. This visit to the Central Bank of Nigeria is to allay fears raised by the cash swap deadline and also to talk about the threats it poses to the conduct of the polls. The governor of the Apex Bank has refused to shift grounds. He seems to be unfazed by the hardship millions of Nigerians are faced with. He says the new monetary policy is in the overall interest of the country. But he assures the electoral body that all the cash they need to coordinate logistics and pay vendors will be provided by the CBN. The chairman of Nigeria's Electoral Commission moved to the office of the National Security Advisor, where he met with service chiefs and the Inspector General of Police. All he got were reassurances about their readiness to create a peaceful and enabling environment for the conduct of the 2023 general election.
We need to let the entire country know that agents of bad news, harbingers of all kinds of stories abound. If these things are intended to scare people, I want to dispel such illusions.
I'd like to reassure the commitment of the armed forces to supporting the police in whatever form to ensure that the security for the election is solid.
Police, in collaboration with the defense and other security sector personnel, are fully prepared to conduct the 2023 general election.
Despite these assurances, the security situation across the country remains a concern, capable of threatening the polls. It is even made worse by the uncertainty caused by the CBN cash swap deadline and the scarcity of Naira notes. All eyes now are on President Muhammadu Buhari as the country looks up to the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces to see how he steers Nigeria out of troubled waters.
Still in the week under review, the Federal High Court sitting in Abuja on Tuesday discharged and acquitted the chairman of the Atlantic Energy Drilling Concept Nigeria Limited, Jide Omokore, of fraud, money laundering and conspiracy allegations. Justice Nnamdi Dingba held that the EFCC failed to prove its case in whole against Mr. Omokore and his companies.
Held that the EFCC failed to prove that Mr. Omokore and his company falsely represented themselves as having the required technical and financial competence to carry out the SAAs in Atlantic 5. Section 1 of the Advanced Free Fraud Act states that there must be essential ingredients of pretense. The court insisted that the EFCC cannot choose what to believe since the federal government haven't seen the capacity of Mr. Omokore concerning the various contracts that were successful. While the party has the continuation of a sweet honeymoon which started a long time ago, Mr. Omokore and his company have executed various agreements in various SAAs, and that of Atlantic 5 was no different. Debt are a key part of corporate dealings, and the EFCC failed to prove that Mr. Omokore and his companies lacked the financial resources to carry out the contract. The court also held that there is no evidence to show that Mr. Omokore had any intention of committing fraud or inducing the NNPC or the NPDC. The court subsequently discharged and acquitted him. Justice Dingba, however, convicted Victor Briggs and Abiye Membrane for receiving car gifts from Atlantic Energy while they were still public officers. They were staff of the NNPC and MPDC. The circumstances at work in which they received the car gift was unethical and are in breach of Section 98 of the Criminal Code. The convicted defendants will be kept in the EFCC custody until tomorrow for sentencing. Reacting, Mr. Omokore says the court has finally proven his innocence.
I've been vindicated, so I'm really grateful to Almighty God. I give all the praises to God for vindicating me. Me and the NNPC, we are business partners, and we continue to be partners. Forever. Yes.
Counsel to the EFCC says they will explore their options in law as they are not pleased with the judgment.
Discharged and acquitted all the defendants in respect of the 15 counts charges. So that's the judgment of the court. We will certainly review, and most likely we are going on appeal because we actually do not agree with the decision of the courts.
We'll flash back to Wednesday, the nation's capital, where the Supreme Court of Nigeria temporarily suspended the 10th of February deadline by the federal government to ban the use of old Naira notes. Ruling in an ex parte motion brought by 3 state governments, a 7-member panel led by Justice John Ukuru restrained the act of the federal government pending the hearing and determination of the motion on notice.
Mustafa, counsel to the 3 state government, told the Supreme Court that over 60% of Nigerians who do not have bank accounts do not have access to cash, and many citizens who have accounts cannot access their accounts, as most of the banks have closed operations as a result of the policy. In a motion ex parte, Mr. Mustapha prayed the court to grant an interim injunction stopping the CBN from ending a time frame within which the old 200 Naira, 500 Naira, and 1,000 Naira notes will cease to be legal tender. He maintained that the 10-day extension by the federal government is still insufficient to address the challenges bedeviling the policy. In its ruling, the Apex Court granted the motion as prayed. It made an order of interim injunction restraining the federal government through the Central Bank of Nigeria and CBN, all the commercial banks, from suspending or ending on February 10, 2023, the time frame within which the old version of the 200 Naira, 500 Naira, and 1,000 Naira denomination of the Naira may no longer be a legal tender. The Apex Court held that these would be in place pending the hearing and determination of the applicant's motion or notice for interlocutory injunction.
The reason for it is that as a well-intentioned as this policy of federal government of redesign is working hardship all over the country. As we can all see, banks are being harassed, Nigerians are suffering needless, especially the downtrodden. Those in the urban areas, they're having problems, but it's more excruciating at the rural area.
It's an ex parte, and because of the urgency and the affidavit of urgency filed by the applicants, the court in its wisdom decided that something must be done because of the urgency. But the court has accurately, in its own wisdom, directed that all processes must be there by 15th, that is Wednesday next week, for us to argue our various positions.
The court subsequently adjourned to 15th February 2023 for hearing of the motion and notice.
And following the suit filed by the governments of Kaduna, Zamfara and Kogi states, the Attorney General of the Federation, Abubakar Malami, also on Wednesday asked the Supreme Court to dismiss the suit challenging the Naira redesign policy of the Central Bank of Nigeria. In a preliminary objection filed by the AGF through his counsel, Mahmoud Magaji and Tijani Ghazali, the federal government argues that the Supreme Court lacks jurisdiction to entertain the suit. Mr. Malami contended that the plaintiffs have equally not shown the reasonable cause of action against the defendant. And the Attorney General also argues that the suit falls within the exclusive jurisdiction of the Federal High Court in matters of monetary policy of an agency of the federal government. He then asked the court to strike out the suit. On to Thursday now, where in the nation's capital, the President, Muhammadu Buhari, approved the establishment of a Presidential Transition Council for facilitating and managing the 2023 transition program. The President also signed the Executive Order of number 18 of 2023 on the facilitation and management of presidential transitions. The Transition Council will be inaugurated by the Secretary to the Government of the Federation next Tuesday, and the members are expected to attend the inauguration in person. A key feature of the Presidential Executive Order number 14 is the institutionalization of the legal framework that will enable a seamless transition of power from one presidential administration to another, which is part of the President's legacy. Now, the meeting of the Council of States in Abuja made headlines on Friday as tensions mounted over the new Naira swap process. The meeting had in attendance former President Goodluck Jonathan and two former heads of state, Generals Abdul Salami Abubakar and Yakubu Gowon. Former President Olusegun Obasanjo opted to participate virtually, and also present at the meeting were Vice President Yemi Osinbajo, state governors, the governor of the Central Bank, and INEC chairman.
The Council of States spent more time discussing the CBN's policy of the Naira redesign and the deadline for the cash swap. The governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria was invited to the meeting to brief the council on how he intends to turn the tides and ease the hardship inflicted by a policy he holds tightly and has refused to shift grounds. Outside the walls of this council chamber, on the streets, there is the outcry of people groaning under the impact of a monetary policy that has removed cash from their pockets, practically killing their purchasing power and leaving them without a better alternative. The Council of States backs the policy to redesign the new Naira notes, but is not impressed with the style of implementation and the scarcity of the currency. A resolution was taken on the policy, and the Apex Bank was asked to ensure a good circulation of Naira notes.
The policy stands, but then the Council agreed that there is need for aggressive action on the part of the central bank as it relates to as it relates to the implementation of the policy by way of ensuring adequate provision being made with particular regard to the supply of the Naira in the system.
The CBN governor should look into making sure that money is available, the new money is available in quantum.
And that they've given the country assurance that everything that needs to be done to have the election at the set date are on track.
The Council of States only play an advisory role to Mr. President and the executive on policy making. But everyone hopes this time Godwin Emefiele will value the advice of the Council and inject more cash into circulation, which will most likely calm the anger. The buck still stops on the table of President Muhammadu Buhari to point the country in the right direction.